Okay, I'm doing this video on a hard subject to talk about. It's about the parole hearing for Daryl Burnett, who's still in prison since 1974. He murdered my brother, Sam, and Sam Evans, and it happened the night of June 12th, 1974. My brother died from his injuries on the morning of June 15th. It's like according to the doctors, and I'll get this into another, I'll be doing at least one more video about his death. He, basically they knew by the following morning that he wasn't going to make it. Anyway, he was driving a taxi to put himself through school. He was going to Harvard College, and I think it was either his first or second night of work, and he picked up a man by the name of Daryl Burnett, who robbed and killed him. And I'll talk in another video at length about what happened that night and everything, because I want to focus on the parole hearing, because what happened is, he's still in prison. He's been in prison now for more than 47 years. I actually, probably about 7, 8, 9 years ago, I got curious about whether he was still in prison or not, because we never heard anything from the parole board or from the Department of Corrections or anything about what was going on with him. We hadn't heard anything since 1974. So anyway, it's like I have some company. The cat's here. Anyway, we hadn't heard anything, so we didn't know. And I was really more than concerned about, I didn't really want to know if he had been let loose and he was out there. It's like it was kind of a scary thought. So finally, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, something like that, I finally got a hold of the right people, the parole board, I think it was Department of Corrections, anyway, victims unit, they have victims unit. Anyway, they, it's like they gave me the information, and I don't have that paperwork in front of me. I put it somewhere else, so I'll probably do another video and talk about that particular letter that I got. But basically what it said, if I remember right, that he'd been up for parole. I think it was either he was still in prison, and he had been up for parole for 11 or 12 times, something like that, and the first time being in, I believe it was 1987, and he's been denied parole all this time. And when I got a hold of them, he had already had a parole hearing the year before, and then there was one coming up about, I guess it would have been 3.5 years ago now, and I was prepping for that. He's been incarcerated he was initially incarcerated in Pelican Bay, and I think he spent most of his incarceration there. And then several years ago, he got moved to Corcoran State, which is in the middle of the state. And then apparently in recent months or in the past year, he got transferred to Folsom Prison. So anyway, so there were certain things I didn't know about, what had happened and so on. So anyway, first parole hearing actually got canceled, and it got canceled on his side. Apparently, they didn't think that he would be permitted, granted parole, because it could have been anything. They didn't know. So they passed on that one. And then earlier last year, probably around, I'd say probably around June or July, something like that, they contacted me again. Actually, it's in June 18th is the date this letter, 2021. He sent me a letter saying he was going to be up for parole. He was going to have a parole hearing on September 28th, 2021. I kind of wish I had done this video back then when this information was fresher on my mind, what happened on the parole hearing, but at least I'm doing it now. So anyway, and they did not postpone it or anything. Didn't get postponed, so we went through with it. It was only by video, only by Zoom. It was going to be only by Zoom. They weren't doing any in person, so I didn't have to drive up to Folsom State Prison. The cats were getting ready. No cat. The Folsom State Prison. So it was done by. And so who joined the video was let's see, it was well, it was him, and then there was like somebody from the Board of Corrections who I think, he was the guy that was like leading it, and then there was somebody else from some other department there, and then he had legal representation too. There was a lawyer there for him, and then there was me. And I got to talk. I talked last. It's like they let me talk last. So they went over things. The one guy was really, the main guy that was doing the parole hearing, was really quite hard on him. It's like apparently he wasn't doing the things he should have been doing. So they went over things, and I found out information I didn't know about. He was one of the big things I didn't know about is that once he was convicted, he went to prison. Officially went to prison in November of '74. I believe, I don't remember the trial. I didn't go to the trial, but I remember. It not taking very long. I believe he just pled guilty to it because they had too much evidence on him. So let's see, the parole hearing. It's like, so one of the things I didn't know about, the big thing is that he was convicted of first-degree murder, and then what I didn't know was the fact that he had joined a gang in prison. I don't know when he joined the gang, probably not long after he got in there. And 3 or 4 years after he went to prison, he joined this gang. Apparently there was somebody that was that they said was a snitch or something. Now the gang that they were talking about, I didn't know who they were talking about. They kept referring to BGF, they kept saying BGF, and it's like, and I go, I wish they would tell me what that is. It's like, and they finally did say it stands for Black Guerrilla Family. That's what he joined. So anyway, him and another inmate ganged up and almost stabbed to death. They didn't kill him, but he was horribly injured, another inmate. And so what happened is he was convicted of another felony and given another life term. So that's probably the reason why he's still in prison. It's like, it's been a really long 47 years. If he had only killed my brother, he might have actually been out. But it's like, because the two, thank God he's still in prison. So anyway, I heard some of the details were he was going to his mom's. Somebody's going to his mom's house. I was taking notes really hurriedly. It's like he needed some money. So he called a cab, and my brother picked him up, and then when he was driving him someplace, it's like to his mom's or whatever, he made a wrong turn or something, and he corrected my brother as he just made the right turn, and then, correct turn, and then he held him up by gunpoint. He had a 22 pistol, and my brother readily gave him the money. And the money that he had. Now, this wasn't mentioned, but it was a low amount of money. I remember the amount being $6, so that he was killed because he didn't want to get caught. It's like Daryl Burnett did not want to get caught, so that's why he shot him. And then he took off in the taxi that he was driving and ran into a mobile home. That's the story that what happened. So he was so when he was in prison, there was a violent assault. The man's name he assaulted was Ivan Hopkins, and he was going to kill him. Apparently the intent was to kill him. And somebody I wrote down here, it's like I don't remember, it's like Mr. Craig, he said something about Mr. Craig ordered the assault. And then, he was also there was also a violation of 115 violation, which is, I had to look it up, as violating disciplinary rules in prison. And I think that was not necessarily in conjunction with that. It was something else, one of the things he got into trouble with, I think, more recently. And anyway, it's like BGF, I guess, was an gang organization, and it was big in the 70s and 80s for the most part. I don't think it's anywhere near as big. I think it's still around, believe it's still around, but not as big as it was. It's like he was it's something I wrote down here. Career gang member. I don't know if he was a career gang. It was like, and I doubt that he still belongs to that, because he does want to get out of prison. Um, he they received the parole board received actually letters on this last parole hearing, opposing his release to go out on parole, and the letters were from the Los Angeles District Attorney and also the San Joaquin District Attorney. So that's good. Because I deemed him, I think it's just because they deemed him way too dangerous to go out in public, public. So, he's, at this point, Mr. Burnett is about 67 years old. Let's see, supposedly he was supposed to write a letter of remorse to my mother, because my mother's name was mentioned, but my mother never got a letter, and they actually know that he did not send a letter. Supposedly it was like in 2020 he was supposed to do that. The interesting thing is, when I was talking and stuff at the very end, it's like he never, during the parole hearing, and I didn't even think about this until months later, I never heard him say, "I'm sorry," sorry for it. Let's see. And then I've got information that he was in the U.S. Army and he was court-martialed. He had gone AWOL 3 times. That's something I didn't know either. Yeah, it's like he didn't, it's like I don't know that he showed any more remorse for it. So, it's like if he did write a letter, he probably wasn't really sorry. He was just doing it to jump through a hoop. Anyway, it's like, so, anyway, they talked for some time. There was a break. At some point, we had a break and came back, and then we continued it. And then I was the last person to talk. And when I started talking to him, telling him about my brother's life and so on, and how much damage it did to the family, I couldn't look at him when I was doing that. I just was looking down at my paperwork and stuff, because I didn't, and I could hear. I'm assuming it was him that was crying. He was crying throughout it, pretty much throughout it. But and even right now to this day, it's like. And actually, at the time of the September of 2021 was a rough month. My mother died earlier that month on the 7th, like 3 weeks before the parole hearing, and I told them that, But, it's like, so it's like the last thing I needed was to go through this parole hearing stuff. But my mother, he never, it's like he still never, Burnett never sent a letter or anything to us, saying I'm sorry or anything, even after that, even after us being on it. It's probably because it's like I told him I wasn't going to forgive him, and that I didn't want him to get parole. I'd actually be okay with him getting parole like 10 or 20 years from, when he's so old he can't hurt anybody. It's like, and the reason I'd be okay with that is like, imagine being like spending your entire life, almost your entire life in prison, and getting out when you're like 75 or 80 years old. And then looking back, and it's like, you're out, and it's like all these years, you spent in prison, it would be, to me, it would seem to me it would be very, very depressing. So anyway, yeah, I told him about, it's like, and then, amazingly, it's like, yeah, I told him about, like Sam's like, it's like, yeah, I told them that we didn't, they didn't get their, they knew he didn't send the letter, the remorse letter. Yeah, I have a note here. It says July 23rd, 77, denied parole because of assault, numerous stab wounds on victim. That was one of the parole hearings. Anyway, what happened was, it's like they took, a break, and that when I was done talking, they said, basically said, thank you, we're taking a break. And they took a break for like 30 minutes, came back, and I thought they would make their decision like a month from now or a month later or something, and they didn't make it. What it was is they made the decision right then and there. They took a 30-minute break, discussed it, and they came back and they said parole was denied as of 9/28/21 that date, and that he'd be up for parole again in 3 years. So in about 2.5 years, he's going to be up for parole again. So, And I have mixed feelings about attending the next one. I may or may not. It's like I'll make that decision when, you know, probably that year if I'm going to attend that. It's like I would say if I'm healthy enough and can keep my act together, I will probably attend that one too. So anyway, it's like, and that's it for now. And it's like I'll probably be doing another one because it's like I don't have that other letter in front of me. I couldn't find it. So in the mess that that's called my front office, it's like I know it's there and somewhere in an envelope. So anyway, there'll be more of this, and thanks for watching. Turn off.